As we move into our Math 126 class, using the calculator, of course, is going to be something of a useful tool to keep up with the workload. And where things slow down, of course, is like fractions and decimals and things like that. So let me show you how you can use your graphing calculator, the TI-84, to put fractions into your calculator. So if I want to put a fraction into the calculator, there has to be like a numerator and a denominator, n over d. So if I hit the alpha button, the screen button here, what it does, it allows me to access these green commands like this F1, F2, F3, F4, F5, and then like the ABCs, A, B, C, D, looks like all the way through to Z. And there's a couple other things here that you can do. That's the gist of there. So what I want to do is I want to get hold of this green button up here, this F1. To do that, though, I have to hit the alpha button first. And if I come here and hit the Y equals button, it'll actually access the F1 button. So hitting the Y equals button gives me this menu. Notice how this first one is n over d. So that allows me to put a fraction in. So since it's already highlighted, I can just hit enter, and your calculator is now ready for a fraction to be entered. So if I want to hit the fraction 1/2 into the calculator, I can type the 1 in. Notice how it's kind of got this arrow here. I can use the right arrow, and it'll move me down to the bottom and type a 2 in. If I'm done typing, I can just hit enter. If I have more to type, then I hit the right arrow to bring it out. If I hit enter, notice how your calculator just writes down 1/2. So it doesn't do anything with it. Now, if you want that to be a decimal, you should already know maybe that 1/2 is the same thing as 0.5. If you go to the math button, notice how it has this arrow, fraction, arrow, decimal. That's what these kind of stand for. If I want to change this to a decimal, I can use my down arrow to highlight that one, hit enter. And what this does is it brings down the 1/2 down here, and this is going to change that answer into a decimal. If I hit enter, it'll give me the decimal 0.5. So again, if I hit the math button again, notice how I have a decimal. If I want to actually change that to a fraction, see how I can do this arrow fraction. Notice how number 1's already lit. So all I got to do is hit enter and answer to a fraction, and it should change that 0.5 back to a fraction. So the last entry is always the answer. Okay. So if I want to put a different fraction in, say 2/3, so I get the alpha button, hit the Y equals button, choose 1 if I want. That's another way to do it. Choose 1, it'll take you to that menu. If I want to put 3/4 in, I hit 3. And you may be able to do the down arrow, I'm not really sure. Notice how the down arrow also works. So you can kind of practice and see what works for you. If I'm done typing, then I can just hit enter, and it just gives me 3/4. And now if I want that to be a decimal, if I hit the math button, it gives me a format to change that to decimal. Notice how it's also number 2. So you can also just hit the number 2, and it'll give me this answer. And what that arrow means is kind of convert that to a decimal. So change that 3/4 to decimal. Again, if you have a decimal like 0.75 and you want that to be a fraction, if you hit the math button, number 1, or just hit enter since it's already highlighted, this will now change that 0.75 back, that decimal back into a fraction. If I enter, it'll change it back to 3/4. So you can kind of put fractions in the calculator, and you can also change them to decimals if you need to. So some other things you can do is like reducing fractions. So there's a section where you have to reduce fractions. So if I give you the fraction 4/8, I can actually put the fraction 4/8 into the calculator. So if I hit the alpha button, hit the F1 button, I can choose number 1 for that format n over d. I could put, say, like 4/8 into the calculator. And if I come out of there, now remember, lowest terms means if the numerator and denominator have a common factor, you're allowed to divide that out, because that's the same thing as like dividing by 1. So notice that 4 and 8 both have a factor of 4 in them. So if you divide the 4 into 4, that would give you 1. If you divide a 4 into 8, that would actually give you a 2. So the reduced form would be 1/2. If I enter, it should also give me that fraction of 1/2. So if I practice, say, like 12/50ths, so that's second F1, notice how n over d is already there, so hit enter, and that gives me that format. So if I want to type in, say, 12/50ths, type in the 12, and you can go either right arrow or down arrow, put you down at the bottom, 12/50ths. if I hit enter, that'll give me like 6/25. So it'll change it into a lowest terms decimal. So another thing you can do is you can change things. You can type in like mixed numbers or improper fractions, if you will. So if I have an improper fraction, remember an improper fraction is when the numerator is bigger than the denominator. If I hit the alpha button, hit the y equals button, what I can do is I can type, say, 12/5 into the calculator. So if I hit enter, if I hit 12 and put down 5, hit enter, notice that leaves it as 12/5. But suppose I want that to be a mixed number. In other words, I need a whole number and then a fraction or a proper fraction right next to it. So if I want to change 12/5 to an actual mixed number, what I can do is if I hit the alpha button, hit F1, notice how this number 3 says if you have a fraction, this will allow you to toggle it into what's called a mixed number. That would be number 3. So if I choose number 3, what this should do is this should change an improper fraction into a mixed number. Hit enter. That'll give me this 2 2/5. So remember, 5 does go into 12 twice. That's where the whole number is coming from. And remember, when you say 5 goes to 12 twice, 2 times 5 would have been 10. If you subtract that, that would give you a remainder. 12 minus 10 would have gave you 2, and that's where that 2 would be coming from there. And remember, you always keep the denominator of 5 there, so 2 2/5. So you actually can put a fraction into the calculator and change it to a mixed number. Okay. You can also type in a mixed number. So if I wanted, say, say 3 1/8 into the calculator. So if I hit the alpha key, hit F1, notice the number 2 has this U/D format. That's the one that gives us the mixed number format. So if I choose number 2, hit enter, oops, number 2 took me out automatically there. So let's try that again. So I have alpha F1, if you will, choose 2. That now creates the format. So if I want to put 3 1/8 into the calculator, I type the 3 in to start with. I use my right arrow to get to the numerator of the fraction part, 1, push down to the bottom there and get the 8, hit enter. Notice how it'll automatically put that into what's called a improper fraction format. So mixed numbers will always default into improper fractions. If I wanted a mixed number, you actually have to go alpha F1. And if I want to change a fraction to a mixed number, that's where number 3 comes into play. So I choose number 3, hit enter. That'll give me this 3 1/8. So it'll change it back to a mixed number. So where can these keys be useful? So again, one way is, reducing is one good way of this can help us. So that's what we call lower terms. It also can go back and forth between improper and mixed. Remember, improper is just the numerator denominator. That's the N/D button. But mixed is more of this U/D format. You're looking for that key. So it kind of go back and forth between those. Something else it can do is it can add and subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. So if you're asked to add, subtract, multiply, or divide fractions, that can be done on a calculator if you cannot see the answer by hand. So the question is sometimes is, what's the faster strategy? Your brain is always the faster tool if you know your multiplication facts and things like that. But if math is not your favorite subject, then you can use the calculator as a tool to do those things. So let me see if I can find some addition problems here and stuff. So if I wanted to do a fraction like 1/2 plus 1/8 plus 3/4. So if I had 1/2 plus 1/8 plus 3/4. So if you can recognize what the common denominator is, the common multiple, if you will, they'll set a 2, an 8, and a 4. And if I'm talking about common multiple, it looks like 8 would be the common multiple because, the first 5 multiples of 2 would be like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And notice how 8 is a multiple. And then you'd have like 16 and 24. You notice how the 8s grow rather quickly. And notice how your multiples of 4 would be like 4, 8, 12, 16. So notice how 8 would be actually the smallest multiple in common. So it's going to be my new denominator. And then, what do you do making the 1/2 turn into that? You would have to multiply the top and bottom by 4. That's where we talk about those higher terms. So 1 times 4 would have been 4, and we've already got our denominator of 8. And notice that that's already got it, so we just keep that denominator. That would be a 1. But here you'd have to multiply the 3 and the 4 both by 2. But 4 times 2 is already 8. We've already done the denominator. We just got to multiply 3 times 2 to the top, and that would give us this 6. So 4 plus 1 plus 6 would end up being 11. That'd be 11/8. So if I put that in a calculator, I have alpha y equals, use the N over D button. I can put 1/2 into the calculator. Oops. Kind of go back and delete there, come out, plus hit that alpha y equals button, choose number 1 again. If I have this 1 on the bottom. Notice how again I typed the wrong number there. I need an 8. So if I hit delete and hit delete again, it'll actually remove that for me. And then if I put an 8 in, there's a couple ways to delete. You just have to practice and see what works for you. Then if I add in this 3/4 in, and hit enter, notice that does give me the 11/8. So again, you can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. I'm just going to do one example there, but like I said, all this can be typed in. If you need some assistance, just let me know. We can help you utilize the calculator to type in fractions in if need be. So I'll stop there.